Kublai Khan.
A fascinating figure, really. A mix of worlds.
Yeah, exactly. Like Mongol warrior, but also Emperor of China.
Exactly. A bridge between East and West, you could say.
And to get this right, we've got a lot to cover.
Well, for sure. We've got historical accounts, analyses, even a bit from Marco Polo.
Marco Polo, wow. Okay, so got to start somewhere. Kublai Khan, born in 1215, grandson of...
Genghis Khan, of course.
Oh.
Talk about a legacy to live up to.
Right. But there's this story when Kublai's just 9 years old, out hunting with his brother.
And Genghis Khan, he predicts the boy's future wisdom.
No way. Like a prophecy.
Sort of, yeah. He smears animal fat on Kublai's finger, a Mongol tradition. Says his words will carry weight.
Talk about foreshadowing. And it wasn't just family. Kublai himself was drawn to Han Chinese culture.
From a young age, yeah. Had Han advisors, scholars around him.
So, smart move politically, but maybe also genuine interest.
I think both. It's that mix that makes him so interesting.
For sure. But before we get to ruling, got to talk about the Mongol side. Kublai, even before becoming Khan.
Proven military leader. His campaigns in Yunnan, for example, pacifying the Dali kingdom.
I was reading about that. Not just brute force, though.
Right. He incorporated the defeated troops into his own.
Clever, turning enemies into assets. This sets the stage right. When his brother, Mongol Khan, makes him viceroy of northern China.
1251, that was. And Kublai thrives. Not just a warlord, he's got skills in administration.
Boosting agriculture, improving social welfare, really getting his hands dirty.
He was. But then, things get messy. Mongol dies in 1259.
Yeah. Succession crisis. Didn't his own brother try to claim the title?
Arikboka, yep. Full-blown civil war breaks out.
So high stakes, and Kublai wins.
He does. 1264, secures his claim as Great Khan, but...
There's always a but in history, isn't there?
This victory also marks the start of the Mongol Empire breaking apart.
So a win, but with consequences. And from then on, Kublai's focus shifts.
Consolidating power within China becomes the priority. Less about expanding outwards, more about internal control.
Makes sense. And he takes steps to formalize his rule, right?
1271 establishes the Yuan Dynasty, takes the title Emperor Shizu.
Wow. Emperor, not just Khan, and makes Dadu his capital.
Dadu, modern-day Beijing. Powerful statement, making that the center.
It's not just imposing Mongol rule, it's positioning himself as a Chinese ruler.
Exactly, and it works. By 1279, after a long campaign, he conquers the Southern Song Dynasty.
So the whole of China under his rule. Think about that.
The first non-Han emperor to achieve that. Truly remarkable.
From the steppes of Mongolia to Emperor of China, that's Kublai Khan's story.
A remarkable rise, no doubt. But ruling all of China, especially as an outsider, that's gotta come with challenges.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't all parades and banquets for Kublai Khan.
Not even close. One of the biggest things he had to deal with, balancing those Mongol traditions with, well, the whole Chinese way of doing things.
Right, because it's not just conquering, it's what comes after.
Exactly. You've got these nomadic warriors used to freedom and mobility.
And then on the other side, centuries of Confucian scholars, bureaucrats, a whole system.
Right, and some Mongols saw Kublai's adopting of Chinese customs as a betrayal.
Like going soft.
Yeah.
Abandoning the old ways?
Yeah. But Kublai, he's thinking long-term. He's building a government for this vast, complex society.
So how does he even begin to bridge that gap?
Well, he tries to appease both sides. Maintains a Mongol-style capital at Chengdu.
Chengdu, that's Xanadu, right?
The one and only legendary place. But Kublai, he also spends a lot of time in Dadu, the Chinese-style capital, dealing with the day-to-day of running an empire.
Two capitals, two ways of life.
Yeah.
Like he's physically representing that balancing act.
A good way to put it. And this tension, it went beyond just culture. It affected his military strategy, too.
How so?
Well, his focus on China, it led him to favor a more cautious, deliberate style of warfare.
Which is different from, say, Genghis Khan's lightning strikes.
It is very different. And you see this shift in Kublai's campaigns against Japan.
Ah, yes. Those famous attempts to conquer Japan. Huge undertakings.
Huge and ultimately unsuccessful. Those failures really highlight another challenge for Kublai.
Which is?
Balancing ambition, the desire to expand, with the realities of governing what he already had.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in conquest, but there's the cost, the logistics.
Exactly. Those Japanese invasions, they drained resources, manpower, put a strain on the Yuan Dynasty's finances.
Didn't help that Kublai was also dealing with, what was it, inflation?
Big time. He was a pioneer, though, introducing one of the first paper money systems.
Paper money, wow. That's way ahead of its time.
It was innovative, simplifying trade, taxes, but risky, too.
How so?
Well, too much paper money can lead to devaluation, and the Yuan government didn't always handle it perfectly.
So, good idea in theory, but the execution was tricky.
It happens, and then on top of all that, you've got natural disasters hitting China. Famines, floods, the works.
Like when it rains, it pours.
Right. And then there's the issue of those other Mongol Khanates that had popped up.
Oh, right. Because even though he was Great Khan in name, his actual control over those other Khanates was limited.
Limited is an understatement. Golden Horde in Russia, for example, they were doing their own thing.
And this caused problems for Kublai.
Oh yeah, trade disputes, border clashes, even wars between these Mongol factions.
So not exactly the unified empire Genghis Khan had built.
Far from it. And to make matters worse, there were rebellions.
From?
Well, some Mongol princes, they resented Kublai's centralized rule, and then some Chinese folks, they chafed under Mongol authority in general.
So internal and external pressures all at once. Sounds overwhelming.
It was. But Kublai, he was a skilled leader, politically savvy. Despite all this chaos, he managed to hold China together.
After centuries of division, no less.
Mm-hmm.
And he rebuilt infrastructure, fostered economic growth, even cultural exchange.
He did. It's remarkable, considering the circumstances, but it was also a constant struggle to maintain stability, control.
It reminds you that even the most powerful rulers face limitations.
A good point. Kublai Khan's story, it's not just about grand ambitions, but about those limits, the immense difficulties he faced.
We've seen his rise, the challenges of being emperor, that constant push and pull between his Mongol heritage and ruling China.
The innovations, the military might, but also the struggles to balance everything, keep it all from falling apart.
It's a lot to take in. What stands out to you so far?
How do we see his influence today?
Well, you got to start with China. Reunifying it under the Yuan Dynasty, that's huge.
Centuries of division, and then Kublai comes along. It's a turning point for China, politically, economically, even culturally.
Sets the stage for everything that comes after, like hitting reset and paving the way for China to become, well, the powerhouse it is.
It's a good analogy, and even though the Yuan Dynasty itself didn't last that long.
Less than 100 years, right?
Right, but its influence is undeniable. A lot of Kublai's policies, especially on infrastructure and trade, they laid the groundwork for later dynasties, like the Ming.
It's kind of mind-blowing how a leader's actions can echo through time like that.
It really is, shaping the fate of whole nations. And it wasn't just within China either. Kublai's reign, it had this ripple effect on East-West relations, too.
Because of his openness to foreign travelers and traders, right?
Yeah.
Like Marco Polo, he was welcomed at court.
Exactly. Kublai saw the value in those interactions, and it opened up these new channels for communication, exchange of ideas.
It's like a window to the wider world swung open during his time.
I like that image.